Welcome to another edition of Green is Good, and we're so honored to have with us today Jim Barber. He's the managing partner of Luke's Toy Factory. Welcome to Green is Good, Jim.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You know, Jim, you have a fascinating background that has nothing to do with the toy industry, really. Can you share your journey and your story leading up to the founding of Luke's Toy Factory?
Well, sure. I mean, my main business for most of my life has been as a photographer. I'm what's known as a still life photographer. I do products, I do annual reports, advertising, all kinds of business-to-business photography.
Right.
So while I haven't had direct contact with a manufacturing environment, I've had a lot of dealings with people in those businesses. And as you're sitting around the studio working on things, you spend a lot of time talking about the businesses. So I kind of got a little background into all that.
Right.
And then a few years ago, I met someone who actually was in the toy business, and you know, we started talking about things, and he told me about how all these toys are being recalled. And my kids were all grown by that point, so I thought, well, this is a good chance to get rid of some of these toys. And I was looking at them, and I noticed that like all of them were made in China. Yeah. And not only that, but a couple of them, I think it was the Thomas the Tank Engine toys, were some of the toys that had been recalled. And, you know, when you see something like that, there's kind of a feeling of, this isn't right. These guys had to know they were doing this. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I got started with the idea of maybe there's a better way to approach the whole toy industry.
Gotcha. And so how did that evolve? And, you know, for our listeners out there that want to follow along as Jim and I have a chat today, you could go to his great website. It's www.lukestoyfactory.com. How did that discussion and your epiphany evolve, and bringing in your son Luke, how did that all come about then into making a business out of this?
Well, there was a few false starts. I mean, we originally, what happens is 85 or 80% of the toys are made in China that are sold here in the U.S.
Right.
And generally, for a wooden toy, that involves like a team of 30 to 40 people, each who have a specific job, and they're low paid, hard working, but they're extremely low paid workers in China, and that's how these companies are able to make their profit on these toys, even though they have to ship them halfway across the earth to get them here. So what I started looking at was, well, how can you make a wooden toy here economically? And at the same time, I had found out about this process. It was really being used just for decking and outdoor furniture. It's called wood plastic composite. Okay. So what that is you take a plastic material and you replace between 30 and 40% of it with wood, with sawdust from basically a waste stream. From where we're getting ours is from furniture factories out in the Midwest. Huh. And the interesting thing is that material, even though a big part of it now is wood, it can be injection molded. The injection molding process makes it much easier to make a toy without having to have a team of factory workers. Your injection mold is essentially, a big part of the process. You still have people that run the machinery, and there's a lot of support people, but it's not quite the same as the massive numbers they throw into toy production in China.
So now technology has allowed an entrepreneur like you to transcend the old practices and really create a sustainable toy factory for the 21st century, a sustainable toy model for the 21st century.
Well, the interesting thing, too, is that at the same time that, this was developing, the whole 3D printing revolution was getting underway. I had actually gone down to a National Plastics Exposition down in Florida, and that was the first place I saw a 3D printer. In the past, if you were going to design a toy, you'd have to send it to some model maker, and it would cost thousands to have them mock up a model.
Right,
Now you put
right.
it on a 3D printer, and for less than $100, you've got a toy. So you can check it and make sure that it fits and works.
That is really interesting. I never thought of that. That is so. All right. So now you get going. You bring what part do you bring Luke? Hey, Luke, you're talking to your son. Come on and join Dad, and let's do this together. Where does that happen? Where does that magic happen? Because that's exciting to bring your son in. And when did that happen? And when did you guys realize with this new technology, you can actually create a business that's both sustainable from a green point of view in making better, greener toys, but also a model that can make profit and can withstand and can grow together as a real business model?
Well, part of the thing was, I'm going to say there's stops and starts to this whole story, and originally the guy who I had as a friend who was in the toy industry was going to go in with me on this whole idea.
Right.
And so he was a designer, and I thought, well, he'll be the one to design these toys.
Right.
But his process of design was completely different from the much more highly technical process of injection molding design. And it wasn't something that he was really comfortable with. And he had other issues and just decided that he was going to bail out of it. So I was left with this 3D printer that I had leased and an idea, but nobody to follow up. And my son Luke had just graduated college.
Right.
So I said, Luke, and it was at the time when, nobody was getting hired for anything, like 3 years ago.
Right.
So I said, Luke, come and learn this 3D CAD program and, see if you can figure it out. And he's always been interested in toys, and he's always been interested in that area of things, but he's not he's much more literal-minded in terms of how you do things. So he actually took to this program really well. Within a couple of months, he had some pretty nice designs. In fact, the fire truck was one of the first things that we had designed. Our thinking was that if worse comes to worse and we can't sell them anyplace else, we can go around to individual fire companies all around Connecticut, and we can sell them like 100 at a time as a promotion.
Right.
There's always a fallback, while throwing these things in the back of our car and driving around from store to store.
It was a B plan. That was your B plan.
Yeah, there's a B plan. There's a C plan. So
good.
That's how I got my designs going. And once I found out what Luke could do, and he's the one that came up with this idea of how they fit together, and the fact that so we're aiming for like preschool kids. Because in terms of the toy business, that's when they still play with toys. By the time they're 6 or 7 or 8, all of a sudden there's computers and iPads, and that really pulls them away.
Right.
So we wanted to make a toy that was a little bit of a challenge, so that kids, so they didn't just sit and watch it play, which is what happens with so many toys now. They push a button and the toy buzzes and rides around and does whatever it does. To us, we wanted the kids to make the sound, and we want the kids to push it around. We want to get back to the simple wooden toy that has kind of fallen by the wayside with all this, fancy electronic stuff. So Luke had that well in hand, and then it was up to me to figure out, well, okay, how do we make these things?
Wow.
And I went around to a bunch of injection molders, and what I found out was that for the most part, anybody who made this kind of stuff went out of business 20 years ago when everybody switched to China.
Right.
And most of the injection molding business is now high-end, value-added things, medical, aerospace, automotive. And getting someone to even talk to me was really difficult. But eventually I met this guy up in Southington here in Connecticut, and he was willing to talk to me. And as soon as he saw the toys, he's like, okay, I'm in. I love them. So he's been our a real guiding star in terms of how you design, how you actually make this happen. He put us in touch with a mold maker up in Massachusetts, and he put us in touch with the company that's supplying our materials, and it's really made a huge difference.
If you've just joined us, we've got Jim Barber. He's the managing partner of Luke's Toy Factory. You could check out what him and his son Luke are doing at lukestoyfactory.com. lukestoyfactory.com. So let's talk about this. This is now, Jim, you and Luke have a green toy product. I mean, it's really, it doesn't have all of the hazards that the old toys had. And it's made out of more sustainable materials, recycled plastic, you said, and sawdust. Is this the magic sauce that you're making your products out of?
Well, here's the thing.
Yeah.
The recycled part of it at this point is the sawdust, which comes from furniture factories.
Okay.
I would like to say that I'm using recycled resin, but at this point, I have to work with what's available. And
right.
I can't find... See, the problem is you have a very rigorous testing procedure you have to go through with toys. Each toy, each color, each part of the toy has to be... They actually scrape and test and take out bits of the material and test it for heavy metals like lead and arsenic and things like that, which, believe it or not, are in colorants.
Got it.
Especially the old colorants that were coming from China. Everyone is pushing to get rid of that. But in terms of the plastic, no one wants at this point to certify to me that they can give me recycled plastic that is clean and can pass these tests.
Got it.
So at this point, I'm using virgin plastic and recycled material. So between 30 and 40% of this product is recycled. I wish I could say it was 100%, and we're working towards that. But again, I'm a small guy. I'm like it's me and my son Luke, and so what happens is, you got to take what you can get.
Sure.
On the other hand, this company that makes our material, a company called Raytech out in Michigan, they actually flew 2 people over here to meet us and sit down with us and show us colors and have really been open to all of it. So we're trying to work on a way to get a stream from a post-industrial source instead of post-consumer source.
Right.
Which can then, give us a chain of custody, so we know this is where it was, and this is how it got to where it is.
Jim, in your new business life as an ecopreneur with Luke, talk a little bit about the fascinating balance between building a sustainable product, but also safety, and then also price. Because this is, as we've learned, as we've done this show now over 5 years, whether you're talking to Walmart or Coors or any of the other amazing and big and iconic brands from around the world, or ecopreneurs like you that are really the innovators of the new generation and of the new economy, balancing sustainability with price and safety has become a journey. It's never perfect. Can you talk a little bit about the balancing act that you always now have to adhere to and continue to watch while you build your business model?
Well, that's one of the reasons, again, why we started with the idea of injection molding, just to step back to an overview.
Right.
To make a wooden toy here, there are great people here in the U.S. that make wonderful wooden toys, and I take nothing away from them.
Right.
There are terrific, handmade, wonderful things. My daughter goes to college up in Vermont, and you see these companies up there making these great things, but they're handmade, and so that's expensive, and so they have to charge a premium for that. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compete with the $15 to $20 toy that comes from China, and I'm trying to those people that are buying those toys, they can look at a $45 handmade wooden toy, and it's great, but they're not going to buy that for their kids because they just can't. That's just the way of the world today.
Right.
So by using the injection molding process, again, you take out a certain amount of that the need to make everything out of hand, and so you can injection molded, and the color is in the toy, so you don't have paint on the surface. We've designed them so there's no metal axles, there's no screws, nails, anything like that. When we test it, we have to use materials that are safe, which is why we have to balance the recycled plastic at this point,
right,
with the virgin plastic. But again, I think as we become bigger, we'll have a better chance to say to these companies, "Here's what we want, solve the problem," and these companies will do it. They're making this material without a buyer. They're making it to lead people, and that I think is a great thing.
Well, listen. When Steve Jobs built the iPhone, he didn't know what they was buying. He was creating his own market. You're doing the same here. Talk a little bit. Are other toy companies like are green like yours? And where is the toy business changing right now? And where do you see it going in the months and years ahead, Jim?
Well, I think if I had to say, one toy company that I look on as a role model, it's a company called Green Toys. Oh. They're out in California. They make their toys out of recycled milk bottles, HDPE. Oh. And they make terrific products. They make a completely different thing from us. They make a pure plastic toy.
Got it.
They make a toy that's done in the style of plastic toys. What we're trying to do is make our toy in the style of wooden toys, with a little more detail than you could afford to make as a woodworker.
Right.
But they're a great company. There was another company that briefly was using wood plastic composites here in the U.S., but again with more of a plastic style. But then they got bought by a Chinese company, and they're gone. Oh. So basically, as far as I know, it's us and Green Toys, and then the great number of more handmade things. There are certain kinds of things that it makes more sense to make here in the U.S., and there's a lot of things that are made by more handmade kind of methods that are great products.
Right.
There is a whole world of American toy manufacturers, but you have to look for them.
Right. Are you worried about others copying your idea?
I don't want them copying our designs.
Right.
But if they copy the idea of making toys here in the U.S. sustainably, and in some way I have a small part in making that happen, I'm perfectly happy.
That's cool.
I'm not trying to become rich off of this. I'm trying to make toys for people who can afford them here in the U.S.
Are most of your sales now online, or eventually are you going to get into more of the traditional toy sales companies that are retail, or are you going to mix a balance of retail and online? What's your vision and Luke's vision on that?
Right now we're going to be mostly online. And the only reason, the biggest reason for that is two things. Creating a retail package is difficult and expensive. It's a tough thing to do, and right now we don't have the resources to do that. And the second thing is managing a retail environment where you have 5,000 retailers who each take 12 toys each means that's a lot of phone calls and a lot of billing and a lot of following up.
Right.
Whereas you can go for online retailers, which is where the business is going. Amazon and large retailers are killing the local market. Right. So I mean that may change. It's all in a state of flux, but right now that's where it's going.
Jim, with regards to sustainability, now that your business is all in the family with you and Luke, what other sustainable things are you guys doing now that you've got green on your mind with Luke's Toy Factory in your own household?
Well, with the company ourselves and with us as a family, what we try to do is we try to buy locally. We try to work locally. Keep that whole distance thing down to a minimum.
So buy local and buy your toys from Luke's Toy Factory. Jim, we're going to have you back on and hopefully maybe even have Luke on with you one day to learn more about the story of Luke's Toy Factory or buy their toys. Go to www.lukestoyfactory.com. Jim Barber, thank you for being an inspirational sustainability toy innovator for the 21st century. You are truly living proof that green is good.